My assignment this week consisted of fitting and installing the trigger and trigger assembly and shaping the back half of the stock. To install the trigger, I first placed the barrel tang screw through the hole to see how it laid. Then I colored up the surfaces of the trigger mechanism with some inletting blue and stuck it in the stock to see where it transferred. Next, I began a cycle of inletting and marking, which continued until the trigger assembly set in as it should. With it seated nicely, I screwed in and tightened the rear tang screw into the front of the trigger assembly. Once tightened, I conducted a functions check, after which I installed the rear screw. To install the trigger guard, I first set it in its front factory cut inlet and let the back portion rest on the stock just beyond and above the rear factory inlet. It seemed to hang just past the lips, so I applied some inletting blue on the surface of the back of the trigger guard, set it back in, and marked the stock with a pencil. Then I inletted it until it set nice and flat all the way down to the surface of the factory cut. Installed the screws. With the trigger guard on, I conducted another function check. This time
with the gun pointed in a safe direction, we're going to place the hammer in the half-cocked position and set the rear trigger until it clicks into position. Alright, it's clicked in position. From here, we shouldn't be able to get the hammer to fall or it to fall when we pull the front trigger. Next, we're going to pull the hammer all the way to the fully cocked second position, and we're going to set the rear trigger again. Alright, and then from here, we're going to test it, stay in position by attempting to push the hammer forward. The hammer won't go forward. Alright, and then with the hammer secure, lightly press the applied trigger while we'll fire the rifle. So we're going to pull the front trigger and just ride it forward. And that concludes the functions check.
To shape the back of the stock, I used my files, a sanding block with 60 and 120 grit sandpaper, and some loose sandpaper, and a dowel. I blended the butts and the toe plates and shaped everything in that area, metal and wood, as flush as possible. Next, I worked the lines and rounded the edges all the way up to the tang and trigger guard. Then I filed and sanded around the tang and barrel, the lock assembly, and the trigger guard, and rounded off any corner edges. Once the back of the stock was shaped, I sanded it down using 160 grit and 120 grit sandpaper from the rear barrel pin all the way to the butt plate. Then last, I took some pictures of the progress and videoed another functions check.
Functions check on a Tradition Shenandoah rifle. Half cock, pull the back hammer, hear the click, hammer won't go forward, pull the front trigger, hammer will not fall. Fully cocked, pull the rear trigger, pull the front trigger, and ride the hammer down.